guys. You know what? I should turn this truck off because it'd be loud. It'd be loud. This truck is loud. How's my beautiful people doing today? So this is a quick check-in. I don't have a lot of time to make this video because, got to get my workday started. But this week I was off. Well, last week. And I just know from now on, anytime I take my home time, I'm just going to stay in a hotel because staying with people, you're always on their time and it's always some crap. But I needed a mental break, so I took a couple days off. Yesterday they had me do what's called a recovery, and it was a hot mess. I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning because they called me at the last minute, put a load on me that was for like midday, and then changed it to a load that I had to pick up by 7. And they was like, the driver broke down, we need you to come right away, which is gonna basically come off your home time a little sooner. And I was like, oh my gosh. They're like, you're the only person that's in that area right now, we really need you. So I had to do what I had to do. I had to do my good deed and was like, okay, I am going to call my dispatcher to find out if they'll give me any extra compensation because of that. But I felt like I had to do that because they really needed me to do it. Anyways, that's the type of person I am. I'm not going to overextend myself, but in that type of emergency, I felt like I had to do it. And because I could have just said no and they would have been fucked. But they was like, thank you so much. You saved the company. You saved the day. That was a special account. We really needed to hold on to that account. And if we didn't deliver that load, it could have really messed up our contract. So I was like, it's the benefit of the company. It's the benefit of the workers. Got to do what you got to do. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to be taking up this hobby, playing harmonica. I've never played. Well, I played when I was a kid. But I feel like this will help me with my anxiety because, when I'm running around, sometimes I don't pay attention to my emotions. But I ordered this on Amazon. I think it was like $18 or something. But I'm going to take little videos watching how to play this. It's kind of like you're doing breathing exercises. My dad used to play trumpet when I was a kid, and he used to try to make us play it until our lips would get chapped. My dad was so extra. He made me play piano. I was a good piano player. I don't think I could play it now because I forgot, but when I was a kid, we played all kind of instruments, girl. I mean, y'all. So, today I want to talk about PTSD and the effects of PTSD. But before I make this video, I want to make a disclaimer. I am not a medical professional. However, I am a psychology student studying for my master's, and I should be graduating by the beginning of next year. So just want to put that out there. Any medical advice that I give is just for entertainment purposes. Utilize it the best way you want to. But I am not a doctor. I don't call myself a doctor. If I decide to get to that level, then yeah. But right now, I am just a psychology student. Well, I don't want to say just. I'm a psychology student with the hopes of graduating by next year. And at that point, I will be a psychologist. Now, there's different derivatives in psychology, in psychiatry, and in counseling. That will be for another video. I will break down the differences. You can also look it up on Google. However, they are all similar. They're all under the similar umbrella. So, is one better over the other? No. But certain licenses gives you privilege to give medication and dosages and needles and things like that. Psychology does not. It is for more, verbal and showing you how to get over certain things like what we're talking about now, PTSD and things like that. But when it comes to giving medication where a person is not getting better based off of cognitive behavioral therapy or something like that, then they would recommend them to maybe a neurologist or a psychiatrist. Okay, that's a quick rundown. Now, PTSD, that is when you receive extreme psychological trauma to the point where it debilitates the brain. And the brain now sends signals to the person's body to act a certain kind of way. So it's not really a neurological disorder, but it's a psychological disorder. And with that disorder, the person is going to relive the experience that caused the initial trauma as if that initial trauma is still present. So we will go back to the beginning of when they even noticed PTSD, right? Which is post-traumatic stress disorder. They've been talking about that from the time of like the Persian War. This is like the historical part of PTSD, since like the historical wars, like the Persian War. By then, they didn't call it PTSD, but they noticed that people were hysteria. That is a real thing when you're hysteria. And there was a war called the Battle of, I think, Herodotus. That's what it was called, Herodotus. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but you could look it up online. It's H-E-R-I or R-U, no, R-O-D-I-T-U-S or something like that. Herodotus. And in the Battle of Herodotus, there was a soldier, I think his name was Epizeculus, and he had witnessed another soldier getting unalived by this really huge warrior. And the way he witnessed it, it really sent him insane. He became hysterical. And he immediately couldn't see. He was so distraught that he literally went blind. So you can look it up on Google. It's called the Battle of Herodotus. And this man went blind, and they couldn't find the physical disability that caused it. And they realized it was psychological. So I'm making this video because I was thinking about this lady, and I think about my subscribers. I think about y'all. Her name was Kim. Oh, I don't want to blast her, but she was asking me a question back then, and she doesn't come on my channel anymore. I don't know if she still watches me. Sometimes people will say that they lost my subscription, like YouTube will just unsubscribe people. But she asked me a question, and I'm the type of person, if I don't have the answer to that question, I'm not going to lie to you just to make myself look like I know what I'm saying. So I told her I really didn't know the answer at that time, but I told her once I start learning more in my course, I will come back with that answer. And she asked me, can you be so distraught or abused? I'm assuming that she went through some abuse, maybe childhood abuse or something like that, or maybe somebody she knows. Can you be so abused that it affects you physically? Because she was saying that there were some ailments that she was having. She didn't describe what it was. If you're listening to this video, shout out to you, Kim, because sometimes when you guys ask me questions, it makes me better. When you challenge me, it makes me better. Now, I don't mean bullying me. I'm talking about, like, if you just genuinely asking me a question, or you trying to see, like, how you say, not trigger my brain, but like, it's still morning, so forgive me if I'm a little, I'm still trying to wake up. When you ask me questions that I don't really know for sure, it makes me have to go and learn more. And I'm not a dictionary, so I'm not going to be able to store everything. You see what I'm saying? I'm getting older too, so that affects the memory. But I'm doing the best I can. And at that time, I couldn't answer her question. She was like, some of the physical things that happen, some of the mental things that happened to her is now affecting her physical states. And I couldn't really put words into what she was trying to say. I understood it because I know that happens, when you have like panic attacks and things like that. But it was more, not saying panic attacks is not serious, but it was more intense of a question than just a panic attack question. So now that we're studying biology of psychology, right, which is biopsychology, we're now coming into another era of the mental, right? So how does things all work? Because, it all goes back to what? Science. Like, how does things actually exist? So with PTSD, It is a debilitating disorder. It can be to the point where you don't want to go outside. It's called the startle reflex, where any little loud noise, you're jumping. So they started talking about this since the time of World War One, Vietnam War. Y'all know the intensity of these wars and what it did to the soldiers. And originally it was called shell shock. That's how PTSD originated, was from the words like shell shock, war neurosis, hysteria war. There's a couple of other names. Idiotism. This is what like certain psychologists name these symptoms that these people was having. And a lot of the symptoms was the startle reflex, the depression, the sleepless nights, which is insomnia, nightmares, irritability, mood swings, literally ruminating of the event, and triggers. Like people trigger, if you're going into a situation that reminds you of that, they get triggered and they get frozen. Like the fight or flight hormone transmitter kicks in, and they can't function. But it can also turn into situations where you can go deaf. Like if you see something so horrific, someone getting brutally, SA'd, because that happens a lot in the military too, where people are getting SA'd. Your organs can literally shut down. Like these brain transmitters, if they're not sending the signals, like for example, the hippocampus. Studies have shown that the hippocampus, which is where it stores memory, emotions, reliving a memory, there's people that are born with smaller hippocampus. If your hippocampus is not of the normal size, that means you can be predisposed to trauma easier than other people. You can experience trauma more intense than another person. They was doing a study on I don't even know how to say that word, myzygotic twins. Well, basically Siamese twins. And it showed that there were Siamese twins that were born with smaller than average hippocampus. Maybe because they had to share the same amount of cells, so it decreased the size of their hippocampus. Y'all like my nails? I got them done. It had to decrease the size of the hippocampus. And one of the twins went into the military and came back with PTSD. And even though the other twin didn't have PTSD, they showed that they both had the similar size of the hippocampus, which means that when you actually go through PTSD, your symptoms may even be more intense. So this is the serious nature of your organs, your bodily structures, your brain mechanism, how you grew up. This is what really is important to understand, because it affects everything you do. So your environment you could be predisposed for a mental illness, and then your environment can trigger these predispositions. There's something else I was about to say. I can't remember. I lost the thought. But basically, once they realized that it wasn't just military soldiers that was going through PTSD, it was, excuse me, average people. They started to now do more intense research on what was triggering it. And they realized it was the amygdala, excuse me. The amygdala played a huge, the amygdala and the hippocampus of the brain. These are brain regions that process emotions, memories, and how you learn things. Like, how do you perceive something? If you perceive it as a threat, then it's going to kick off symptoms in your body that's going to feel like it needs to protect itself. So it's going to push on you to have all these defense mechanisms, which is like the fight or flight. I don't know what's causing my throat to itch. The fight or flight, the irritability, the mood swings, the insomnia, all of these things are the body's defense mechanisms. But it's overactive. It's like now hyper stimulated. So with it being hyperstimulated, it's going to now kick off regions of the brain that really shouldn't be activated. It's going to send these signals to say, this is happening right now. Let's go into overdrive. So what scientists and psychologists or the medical professions are trying to do now is the brain makes millions of neurons before you're even a full adult, and then it fully becomes like all the way incorporated in like your early adult life, where all your brain cells and everything is done, it's finished, it's like complete. However, when you damage a neuron, it's not easily fixed. That's why some of these conditions are, whether it's irreversible or it takes a long time to fix it. And this is why it's important to pay attention to your feelings, your emotions, and how you behave, because your behavior also is an indicator of what's going on up here, right? So you don't want to wait till it gets to the precedence where you can't reverse it. Because when PTSD get to that high state where it's like straight paranoia and hallucinations, you now tapping into comorbidities of other illnesses, other mental illnesses. You see what I'm saying? Like when you start tapping into depression or personality disorder, it's now they got to treat not just the PTSD, but they're going to have to treat the other comorbidities that come along with your situation. So you got to catch it while you see. If you know you normally don't react a certain kind of way and something's triggering you and you're not sure, pay attention to it. Learn to check yourself. Don't wait till somebody else start checking you and saying, why are you acting like that? What's going on with you? The beautiful thing about psychology is that you can customize it to how you also think without going too far off the deep end and, how you would say, misinformation. So with me studying all of this and actually having to be a recovery of PTSD and understanding that healing is very vital to the mental health of a person, it can allow me to tap into people's situation without being so by the book. Like, oh, we're just going to give you book terminologies. I'm going to give you actual experiences. I'm going to, not in this video, but I'm going to talk about it where you can understand in layman's terms or just like everyday words how you can survive certain things, what you can do, what you can tap into. Because it's okay if you know something, it's about applying it. Is it really just this easy to just apply a situation that you're saying? No, it's probably not. It's probably going to take everything in your DNA to restructure your brain. But is it possible? Yes. Is it absolutely possible? Not always. Because sometimes if you're pre-deformed, meaning your predisposition is your brain is already altered because of maybe something your mom did, maybe she took drugs, maybe you just was born with that defect based off hereditary genetics. It may be not much you can do, but you can still stabilize your situation. You see what I'm saying? So I be losing my train of thought because I'm trying to get all this information in a short video. What was I up to? But anyways, they was doing studies and they realized that, I was saying, catching it before it becomes too extreme. And how do you do that? They was studying the regions that are opposite to PTSD. And the regions that they realize they need to tap into is the dorsal prefrontal cortex and the medial prefrontal cortex. These are the regions that kind of like make sense out of nonsense. These part of your brain would be like, no, this is not really happening. This is all in your brain. This is not really happening in the reality. But see, the reality is the real part of yourself because, the brain is your reality. So once those neurons have already been created before you become an adult, because like in your adolescence, majority of your neurons is already done. This is why childhood abuse is so hard to treat. Not saying it's not treatable, but it's because the neurons was already complete by the time that person became an adult. So whatever they learned, the trauma, the PTSD, all of that, whatever they learned when they was a kid, it's going to be hard for that brain to become transformable, because it's all about transformation. But through epigenetics, you can transform your DNA. You can transform it, but it's going to take work. And a lot of people don't have that kind of, they don't have that kind of patience. Because when these emotions start to come and they feeling it, like anxiety or depression, they don't want to hear what you got to say. But this is why you got to get ahead of it. When you're not in the moment of depression, when you're not feeling anxiety, this is when you need to start paying attention to what it is you need to do. And getting ahead of it is basically understanding your reasoning skills are one of the triggers as to why you are experiencing what you're experiencing. Like I said, when that brain tell you something is real, can't nobody else tell you that it's not, right? So now you're the one in charge of that brain. You're the one in charge. Now the loud truck want to come when I'm trying to talk. Hold on. You're the one in charge of... I might have to turn my truck on if it gets too hot in here. You're the one that's going to have to... I'm losing train of thought because every time I try to think of what I'm trying to say, you are the captain of your own ship, basically, is what I'm saying. So you... Okay, now when it's really bad, sometimes neurologists, people have to step in and start to alter certain situations in your brain. You know, like they got hypnosis and all that type of stuff. But we're not talking about when it's like that extreme. Okay, we're talking about when it's still to the point where it's treatable without the invasive therapy, invasive surgery and things like that. You see what I'm saying? So you got to start. It's like it's so many levels as to how you have to treat it. But one of the things is you have to make the first step to get it treated. And they have to figure out what part of your emotions is trapped in that PTSD. For example, if it's a war victim, if it's a victim. If it's a war, like a soldier, a veteran, that PTSD might be stimulated, right, from violence or... Okay, so there's another, it's a derivative, but it's not from PTSD, but they work kind of like hand in hand, right? And this, do I need to back up a little bit? This derivative is called moral injury. Now, moral injury is not just for PTSD, for veterans. Moral injury could be for anybody. Moral injury is another disorder, but it's more circumference around guilt and shame. And PTSD is circumference around fear. But fear is a broad term. So they got to figure out, well, what part of fear are you having an issue with? Now, the part of the therapy is to extinct the fear. It's called fear extinction, right? But how do we get to fear extinction? We have to first consolidate and then reconsolidate what's going on in that fear. We have to figure out what kind of fear are you triggered by? Are you triggered by relationship fear, where is fear of getting close to people? Are you triggered by violence? Are you triggered by so when I was growing up, I had what's called parentification. Now, parentification is when you're always taking care of people's kids, whether it's your mama kids or you're just always in the role of a child taking care of another child, but you are the one that's supposed to be the adult, right? So now they push you in a role that you wasn't ready for. So you grow up with this fear of children or this fear of being a mom. You have some women, they don't have no nurturing skills. Absolutely none. That scares them. They're like, man, do not bring a pamper over here, okay? Because something happened to them where they were put in a role of responsibility that they wasn't ready for. I kind of took on that challenge and I was like, oh, I love children. I love babies. I just was obsessed with babies. And, I have 3 kids now, but I didn't realize, being that I'm a brave person, one of my traits is bravery. I take on things that I know I ain't supposed to be messing with. And it's just like, I just say, bring it on. But what it does is eventually it tears you down. So that's why in my level of motherhood, I became a borderline. Like, I was constantly under a state of post-stress traumatic syndrome, postpartum depression. It was always something going on with me mentally when I was with my children. When I was a younger mom, if that makes sense. All my kids are adults now. Woohoo! Yes. My last daughter just turned 20. I am like, yes. So see, I lost my train of thought again. Moral injury. So one of the derivatives that they found out with soldiers was that they was getting this condition called moral injury along with their PTSD, which was exasperating the symptoms. Moral injury can happen to anybody. So I'm gonna give an example of how moral injury could work. Let's talk about the situation with the P. Diddy case. The people that were there that witnessed some of the things, not saying the ones that was what's that word? Not saying the accomplice people, like not saying the people that was down with it, but the people that was just like in that vicinity that had to experience that for whatever reason. And they felt like there was a lack of power or control that they could take to stop the situation, right? Those people can now experience moral injury, and that moral injury can turn into PTSD. So moral injury is similar situation to PTSD, but the cause of it would be the baseline cause would be shame and guilt. But they would act it out in the similarities of PTSD. This is why sometimes it can be confusing to decipher which one they have. This is why they need to go get therapy, right? But with the with the moral injury, the person that witnessed a situation that caused them to question their belief system. Now, moral injury doesn't necessarily mean you only witness it. It could mean that you partook in it. You partook in the situation that went against your moral belief system. If you was, let's say, a devout Christian, or you believed in the sanctity of marriage and family, which is your culture belief, but you partook in a situation where you went against that, whether you went to a freak show or a strip club or something like that. I'm not saying just a one-time thing. The one-time thing can cause cognitive dissonance. It may just make you feel like, okay, this is just cognitive dissonance. It's something you tell yourself to push through the bad behavior so that you don't really feel too much guilt. It's a protection, but sometimes people overuse that cognitive dissonance, right? So you might just you might engage in one thing. That's not going to cause moral injury. This moral injury is like similar to PTSD. It actually affected your brain. Your neurotransmitters are now, every situation is being challenged as shame and guilt. It's a symptom now, right? It's a symptom where you can't decipher the difference. That this situation is no longer existent. It's over. It's done. So with military vets, with all the I should say crime, but with all the war that they have to see, the violence and all of that, right? A lot of them had to partake in it as well. When they go back into the civilian world, they can't function because they're like, man, how can I say that I'm a patriot or no, I can't even say patriot because, well, technically, because that's a culture. So your patriotism could be your culture too. So I have to kind of look into that word a little bit. Let's say they're Christian or they're Jewish or their cultural belief, like some Hindus, they're very against violence. Like they don't even like to kill an ant, right? Now you're going into this career that makes you have to do just that. And then when they come back home, they can't face their family. And the family is like, what's wrong with you? You signed up for this. And they're like, well, yeah, but I didn't know it was going to affect my moral conscience. Now, every time they go to church or every time they're around their family, all they could think about is, I'm a hypocrite. I should be ashamed of myself. I should just unalive myself. I don't deserve to be here. I did all this bad stuff in the military. I can't think about it no more. You know what I'm saying? It's like this rumination of constant injury after injury, and they're injuring themselves because they're not able to split. They're not able to split healthily and just disassociate from the situation that took place. Disassociation sometimes is necessary to get through a situation. But when you start to combine the two, it becomes problematic because now you're blaming yourself for something that you had to do as a career, and you didn't really sign up for all the violence that came with it, but you were kind of like under pressure to perform. This was part of your performance, so you would have been put in jail. They'd put your ass in jail. You try telling them, I ain't going to war, not today, I need to go to sleep, your ass will be in jail. Okay? So when you get to that point where you're like, damn, do I do this or do this? But then when you do this becomes a problem where you're deteriorating from the inside out. You could literally start to deteriorate. Your brain just wants to shut down. Your organs start to shut down. You start feeling all kind of bed sores and headaches, and the headaches turn into sleep paralysis. And you're just a vegetable. You're literally just turning into a vegetable at this point. So this was one of the questions that my subscriber asked me back then was, can something that happened to you, whether it was abuse or something that was triggering your psychological, mental, can it start to affect your physical? Absolutely. That's the answer to that question. Absolutely. And once it starts to affect your physical, it can actually damage your organ, depending on what it is. If it's like you turn blind, you turn deaf. There's literally times like this movie called Split. I don't know if it's part 1 or part 2, but the young girl was snatched out of her environment by a kidnapper who had dissociative personality disorder, right? He was split, schizophrenia kind of thing. And she was so distraught by the tragedies. Excuse me, let me go back. I made a mistake. I can't remember the movie exactly, but I think she had a childhood disorder. It was from childhood. And when the guy snatched her, it ruminated her childhood memories of, I think it was her granddaddy or uncle who used to sexually assault her. And through the trauma, she couldn't talk. It messed up her voice box. I'm thinking from what happened to her as a child, she suffered moral injury. Because sometimes when you're a child, because this man, he tried to snatch me when I was a kid. I was about 10. And I went to the store for my dad. Late at night, my dad sent me to the store at 9 p.m. And this man tried to snatch me off the step. I could smell his liquor on his hand. And I bit him so hard, he ran. But he was probably going to snatch me and try to essay me. And I remember going in the house and I felt embarrassed. I don't know why I felt embarrassed. I was assaulted. You see what I'm saying? I was a victim of a crime. I told my dad because my sister, who passed away in 2011, she forced me to tell my dad. I was like, no, let's just let it go. My sister was like, no, we're going to go tell him. And my dad was the one that went and filed the police report and all that stuff. But what I'm trying to say is, in that movie, she lost her voice box probably because she was ashamed that this happened to her. Even though she couldn't control it, sometimes victims of essaying, they feel the brunt and shame because someone violated their personal space. And they feel like, well, because they lost the power or the the control over the situation, it caused a level of humiliation. Being essayed is humiliating. And then now to talk about it to another person and relive that situation by telling the other person, this is what happened to me. And then you got to make them believe it, because a lot of times with the way situations play out, they'll say it was your fault, right? Sometimes, not a child. But like we as children, sometimes we see that happen to adults where they'll go forward, tell their story, and then they'll be called a liar. So a lot of these things play out. And the predator gets to walk free because the predator knows how the situation go too, because they probably been down that road where they was sexually assaulted by someone else and they realized their story fell on deaf ears. So they was like, well, you know what? If you can't beat them, I'm going to join them. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just giving you the history on how people think, how PTSD affects people. It affects people in different ways. They could become the villain or they could become the victim. Right? So now this child might have suffered moral injury, PTSD, and all that stuff that they're now discovering. There's several layers to this PTSD situation. It's not just one straight, they're traumatized. It's deep. The mind is highly deep. It's like a valley of rabbit holes. And you got to keep going and shifting through these rabbit holes to see what comes up. So these neurons that have been made, these billions of neurons, they all have a specific assignment. So you mess with any of these neurons and these synapses by a split half a second, because these things are smaller than a second, and all hell can break loose in that person's brain. So you're looking at it as, oh, just calm down. Y'all got to stop taking this stuff so lightly. Oh, just go sit down and just breathe. No, it's deep with these people that have these disorders and traumas. That's why they're getting help for years. They're paying thousands of dollars. A lot of these medical insurances are not covering these disorders. Some of these disorders are brand new that they're just discovering. They don't even have a name for it yet. You see what I'm saying? It's a lot going on in the medical industry that they don't talk about on a regular basis, because they don't want to frighten you, and they want to collect millions of dollars on people. But also what I don't like, and I don't want to keep hearing, is you don't need therapy. Therapy's fake. You do need therapy. I suggest that everybody that have insurance and capabilities of getting some level of counseling or therapy, jump on it. If your job is offering that health line, that hotline where you could just talk, you will be surprised that you would discover you had some stuff going on in your unconscious mind that you was not aware of, that you absolutely need to get checked. Doesn't mean you got mental illness. It just means you are able to, what they call it, self-discipline. It's getting a little hot. I gotta open this truck. So, there's a lot that I want to say, but I'm all over the place right now, and I'm sorry if I'm a little bit confusing on any of my topics. But like I said, I'm not the type of person, if I don't know something, and I will tell you I don't know. I would have to go find it out for you, because I'm not on here for just myself. Like, oh, I just want to, sound smart, or, people label me on here as, oh, I just want to sound smart. No, I have done the work. I read a lot. All through my life, I've always been a curious type of person. I've read books ever since I was little. This is one of the ways it helped me to recover from the PTSD when I was growing up. My father always used to put hands on me, punch me, skin my skin, weapons. Like, I've seen a lot of violence growing up as a child. And reading was my soothing mechanism. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know I had PTSD as a kid, but one of the comorbidities that came along with my PTSD was I have generalized anxiety, right? If I don't get ahead of it, it could debilitate me. There's days where I don't even want to think. I wake up like, I don't want to think. Just leave me alone. But I don't put my anxiety on other people. I check myself. And I'm going back into therapy because with all the stuff that happened to me this year and last year, with the relationship I was in, I'm still functioning, but I don't want to go into another relationship where I'm reliving certain things. Like, a person could say a word and you're like, oh, is he doing that because of this? And you overthinking it because your last person would always say, I'm just going to give you a scenario. Let's say the last person always called you teddy bear, and it was their word of endurement that made your guard come down. But within that same day, they'll disrespect you and you're like falling apart. So with the mood of someone lifting you up, you know what I'm saying, and then dropping you, which is what people do when they're in abusive relationships. They'll hold back their feelings from you on purpose. Like doing little things to devalue you, right? When you go into a new relationship, that person might literally generally just like using the word teddy bear, and they might say the word that you be like, oh my God, are they doing that to hurt me? You don't realize. I haven't put it to the test because I haven't been in a relationship yet, because it's not that I'm not mentally ready. It's just that I still feel like I need time for my own healing. Now, I don't want to be one of those people that take 15 years, You get out of one relationship and you just like, man, I'm never dating again. That's not my style, because I'm very brave, but at the same time, I have to think about the other person, the other future person that might come into my life. They don't need to be dealing with nobody that is in residual damage. Okay? It's not fair to the other person. And this is why that theory of, dating a person, like, especially how they say older women come with baggage and older men come with baggage. But, they put more harsh terminologies on older women than the men. It's because they realize you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's the statement. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, because once that damage has been done to the brain, those neural cells, it's hard to regenerate them. You have to figure out ways to like tap into the other regions. As I was saying, the medial frontal cortex and the dorsal frontal cortex. Those two regions they've been doing a lot of extreme research on, because they realize those two regions might be the saving grace to calm down the dysfunctional regions. Now, the amygdala is not dysfunctional and the hippocampus is not dysfunctional, but it can become dysfunctional easily if trauma triggers it. Those are sensitive organs in the brain, okay? Because those sensitive organs are there to protect the brain in times of crisis. But sometimes if it's overactivated or hypersensitive or overstimulated, it can cause a havoc in that brain. So what they're realizing is the medial frontal cortex and the dorsal frontal cortex, those two things have the capability of deactivating the dopamine and the hormones that the hippocampus would push out there. So one of them is the norepinephrine and the epinephrine, which is the fight or flight, freeze type of hormone that kicks off in a time of crisis. Those are kicked off by the amygdala and the hippocampus. So the dopamine is not bad, but if it's overstimulated, if you overstimulate dopamine, it can cause hallucinations. If you start getting paranoid, they usually have to check the dopamine levels, right? That's how neurologists go into your brain and see what's going on. But I don't want to get too scientific right now, because that could take another whole... Because y'all gotta remember, I study this stuff. But they're realizing the prefrontal cortex is the key to tapping into to lower those levels, to turn off. It's like turning off a pipe. If it's too much water coming out that pipe, if it's hot water, it could burn the hell out of somebody. But if they turn it down and mix it with a little cool water, you could have the right temperature in that brain. So they're trying to figure out ways to tap into certain things, certain signals that can lower these mental illness. Because a lot of times with mental illness is because there's too many levels of something. It's kind of like when you have vitamin deficiency. When you have vitamin D deficiency, that can cause schizophrenia. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's a lot that the brain needs to have like that homeostasis. Homeostasis is like the equal balance in your body. Like the body needs 97, 96 to 99, whatever, to have normal temperature. If you sleep with the air on and your body drops too much temperature, what happens? You wake up with a sniffle, right? Because now you've kicked in I think it's the histamine levels. If the histamine levels is too high, it's going to cause you to sneeze and you become overactive in allergies, right? The histamine is also a defense in the body, in the brain. The serotonin, if it's too much serotonin, you'll be depressed. You have low levels of optimism. All of these things the brain needs to function at a homeostasis level. And in order to do that, you have to understand what's necessary. Once you understand what's necessary, that's when you can now tap into your medial frontal cortex and feed the brain the proper nutrition, which is the right environment, the right foods. Food is another thing. Eating bad foods can trigger things in your body that is making you feel depleted. You see what I'm saying? When you feel depleted, now it affects what? Your energy levels. It affects your sleep. It affects your muscle. Your muscle is the core to your body. If you have no muscle, your body is going to wither. So this is why when people have obesity problems, they got to tap into what? their weight levels, their hormones, because now your hormones is affected by your lack of muscle tone and too much fat cells. Now, some people are predisposed to fat cells. They were born to be sort of fat. Not saying like they can't control it, but sometimes their levels are not the normal levels. They had shown it in lab rats, where lab rats were, their cells were a lot bigger on the fat level than the lean rats. And anything the rat was predisposed that was fat, anything they ate made them bigger than the average person. So they had to eat less calorific food or whatever. So all these things, if you don't know that about your body naturally, like if you look at your family and they all big bone, that could be a cue. You are predisposed to being big. I'm predisposed to being small. Majority of my family on my dad's side is thin. So I was always suffering trying to gain weight when I was a kid. But now I got to watch my weight because I had 3 kids. My metabolism slowed down. So now I'm at the same stage where a lot of women over 40, we got to watch what we put in our bodies because it would affect our weight. I try to exercise on this truck. You see what I'm saying? I got the equipment. You know what I'm saying? When I'm sitting at the shipper, I'm using this. Okay? I don't play. I mean, I'm not optimally fit, but if I was in the gym, I would be fit. Okay? But I do what I can right now, but you gotta take your mental health, your spiritual health, and your emotional health, and your physical health. They all gotta be interplayed for you to be fully whole, healed, and in alignment. If a person is big, it doesn't mean that they're not healthy. It's when you become obese. Some people are naturally predisposed to be big. You just gotta accept that. You still look good. You still look good. There's guys that look good, like Gerald Levert. I like the way he look. Okay, what I'm saying is, you just got to get to that point where you are whole and complete. Before you leave this realm, hopefully you're going this way, not down that way, okay? But before you leave this realm, you should try your best to be at your highest complete self, your highest potential, which is mind, soul, body, spirit. We all good, okay? I watched the movie Sinners over the weekend. I want to talk about that. It will be some spoiler alerts. But I thought the movie was very powerful. The message, a lot of people that walked out of the movie, they didn't get the message. That's why they was like, oh, it's just about vampires. No, this movie was symbolic. And it's basically part of the movie that really got me was the destiny swapping. And I was just talking about that, 2 weeks ago? There's people out here that want your life. They will destiny swap, absolutely. They will steal your energy and use it as if it was their own if you are not grateful for who you are and how you were created. So you better love yourself, hug yourself, and understand that we all got work to do. So you don't put yourself down because somebody else got better than you. But that's the main movie. That's the main message of that movie. But I love you guys. I got to go. I've been a little bit over my time. Talk to y'all. Be safe. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. If you're new, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to have fun together. That's what I'm here for. Laughter and healing. Bye.